delighted to have Dr. William Bennett with us. Thanks for joining us. You may know that Dr. Bennett is a native of Brooklyn, New York. Does it come out in your accent?
You'll see.
Okay, we'll find out. You may also know that he was appointed by President Ronald Reagan to serve as chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and also served President Reagan as Secretary of Education. Later, under President George H.W. Bush, he served as director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And of course, before all of this, Bill Bennett earned his PhD in philosophy at the University of Texas at Austin, which I think is also your sort of alma mater to Marvin Olasky, as well as earning a JD from Harvard Law School. How'd you fit all that in?
When you're young, you can work hard.
Keep that in mind. Nowadays...
When you're old, you just can't sleep, so you have no choice. Excuse me.
Nowadays, Dr. Bennett remains in the spotlight as the host of a top 10 nationally syndicated radio show, Bill Bennett's Morning in America. He is also the Washington Fellow of the Claremont Institute and a contributor to CNN. Many of you, however, are more likely to know him through his writings. He's the author and editor of 20 books, 2 of which, the Book of Virtues and the Children's Book of Virtues, rank among the most successful of the past decade. His most recent book, The Book of Man, Readings on the Path to Manhood, explores the remarkable lives of honorable men. And of course, in something for which we take great pride here at Patrick Henry College, the book was produced with the help of a team of present and former PhD students. I think the leader of that team was Mr. Bennett's full-time producer and a former PhD journalism major, Chris Beach. Are you here today, Chris? Welcome back to your alma mater, Chris Beach. And it is a privilege, therefore, to welcome you today, Dr. Bennett, and give you a taste of the college, which I think has been in the process now for a little over a decade of trying to implement the sort of principles you've long been advocating in education. So please welcome Dr. William Bennett and our host, Marvin Olasky.
Talking about sleep.
Yeah.
For 7 years, you've done this radio show from 6 to 9 a.m.?
Yeah.
What time do you get up in the morning?
3:30.
Okay.
Last night was short because we had this debate, so I had to watch that, so it was a short night. So if I fall asleep during my own remarks, don't judge the merits of my remarks on that fact.
So do the callers at 6 o'clock in the morning speak as if they've actually been awake for a while?
West Coast.
West
Coast callers. The first callers we get are from California, Carmel, Santa Monica. It's a 24-hour country.
Yeah. And what do you sense after 7 years? Give you one of these 30-second questions. What's the mood of the country at this point, or at least what's the mood of your callers? Any generalizations you can make?
Yeah, and then can I say thank you and a word about Patrick Henry?
Sure.
Anxious, worried, depressed, very concerned about their future, more concerned about the future of their children and their grandchildren, the future of the country. Can we keep America the country we know as America? It's very, very real, very palpable, and we hear it every day.
Okay.
It's a different kind of show too. I'm pretty well known as a conservative. CNN certainly regards me as one. I am the conservative commentator for CNN, which I was kidding once with Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly. I was saying, any conservative can go on Fox, preaching to the choir. I said it takes a certain degree of courage to parachute in behind enemy lines twice a week and go on CNN. And Sean Hannity very quickly responded, courageous and anonymous. No one's watching, Bill. No one's watching CNN. Anyway, let me say a word about Patrick Henry, if I can, because I've been wangling for an invitation for a long time here. I've heard, Mr. President, about the college. I know something about the work here. Am I in the Barbara Hodel Center?
Yes, you are.
The Hodels are dear friends. When I first came to Washington, I first was in the cabinet, Ronald Reagan's cabinet. Don Hodel was the first person I met. And we went to his office. He invited me to pray. And I said, I'm a Catholic. I don't do it just like that. But I'll give it a try. But you're not hearing my confession. For that, I need a priest. He then said, all right, since things are going well, would you like to meet Billy Graham? And, you know, on my first day in the cabinet of the United States, I was a young guy, 1985, I was 15, 26, 42 years old. I went in and had a meeting, 3 or 4 of us with Billy Graham. And the Hodells were always very close. Barbara and my wife Elaine very close, sharing a lot of views and a lot of passions. But it's really very nice to be here, and I want to thank by name Christopher Beach, who we've already introduced, Nathan Martin. You all know Nathan Martin. Yeah. He's a devil, that guy. He is. No, he's a fine guy. Olivia Lind, is she here? Shane Ayers, Brian Ducey, and David Carver. That was my team, and it's a Patrick Henry team. And I get asked, how do you put together a book like this? I said, through concentration, work, perseverance, my own memory, my own recall, and get a group of young, talented, smart, eager people with a good liberal arts basis and set them to work and pay them. Pay them. Yeah, you can get paid for this, actually. Not a lot, but I'm very, very grateful for the team. And I wanted people in literature and classics and philosophy, because that's what we need more of, I think. And they went to work, produced a stack, I don't know, that high, and then I went through it, and that's how we got the Book of Man. Christopher Beach was the team manager. Do you guys know him well enough that I can kid him in public? Oh, yeah. He's really very good, and I brag about him a lot, and I tell people, you know, he's the youngest producer of a nationally syndicated radio show in the country by about 20 years. He's 22 years old and is the producer of this show and stacks up very well with all those older folks. And I said, this is what a good college education and homeschooling will do for you. The only problem, look, he knows it's coming, is the homeschooling thing. And I have the highest regard for homeschooling. But he forgets stuff on the airplane all the time because he's used to having his mom around. And I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. But he does a great job. I'm very, very pleased to be here, and I pay tribute to what you're doing, what you're trying to do and what you're doing, as evidenced by the work that these young people did for me. Thank you. Sorry to be long-winded.
Yeah. Morning in America here at Patrick Henry. Morning in America is the name of Bill's show, which of course refers to, well, the time of the show and also President Reagan. But does it refer to your own sentiment about America right now? I was reading Mark Stein's new book, and it could be titled Evening in America. Things look pretty much down the drain. What evidence do you point to, if any, or is it hope and faith without evidence, I suppose, that this is morning in America, or can be?
Well, that's a great question. I'm stronger on the hope than on the evidence, but there is some evidence. The hope is this. I guess most of it, Marvin, one more thing. Do you all know this book, The Tragedy of American Compassion? Do you know the book? I think there are about 10 great books about America that really explain America and things we do right and things we don't do right, and this is one of the 10. Number one is the Federalist Papers. I think the single best book on the doctrinal foundations of American life is The Crisis of the House Divided by Harry Jaffa, which is a brilliant, brilliant book. My third favorite book about America is Reinhold Niebuhr, maybe heresy here, but The Irony of American History is a brilliant book. When I taught at Harvard, I made them read that. They didn't like that. And I would put Marvin Olasky's either 4th or 5th or 6th. It's a brilliant book. And if you want to look at what's wrong and how we got off track, go to that book. And I'll buy lunch for anybody who can tell me, and this may be obscure, I'm sure it is, but who introduced me to Marvin Olasky? A woman named Arianna Huffington. This is somewhat hard to believe. She is a very well-known liberal, and she brought you to my house, our house, and she said, you must meet Marvin, and then I introduced you to Newt. And Newt was speaker,
right,
and bought how many copies of The Tragedy of American Compassion?
Oh, just a few for his close friends.
Yeah, well, Others bought more anyway. It is, the reason I got into this is sorry for the digression. Justice Frankfurter's wife, Mrs. Frankfurter, used to say, Felix makes two mistakes when he speaks. First, he digresses from his text. Second, he returns to it. I'll return to it because I said hope in American history. I did a 3-volume book series called America, the Last Best Hope, to try to get this into the schools, because I think the failure of American students to understand what America is about is our most serious problem. They don't know what the country is. Go to Occupy Wall Street and you'll see they don't know what America is supposed to be about. In doing that research, I discovered, don't ever count this country out. The American capacity for self-renewal is perhaps infinite. I don't know. I think the antibodies are kicking in. I think people are saying this is a terrible set of circumstances we're in, and we have to recover. What is evidence? What are life signs? If you don't mind a little politics, I think the elections of November 2010 were. I think the rise of the Tea Party. Funniest thing said at that time was said by P.J. O'Rourke, which he was asked what did he think of the election returns. He said, this wasn't an election, this was a restraining order. People said, stop. Now, a lot of the air may have gone out of that. We may be in another shift in American life. Democrats, liberals are taking great comfort from what happened yesterday. But I don't want to speak in terms of conservative, liberal. I want to talk in terms of what's right and what's not. And I think what we are seeing that's maybe most encouraging is a call, sometimes inchoate, sometimes unclear, sometimes diffuse, but a call for first principles. Can we remember what this thing's about? You've seen people talk about, let's study the Constitution. Let's go back to the Constitution. Congress dutifully read the Constitution line by line. People have a sense that we've gotten off kilter, off center, and we need to go back radical, back to the roots, back to the beginning. If we go back to the beginning and back to the founders, then I'm very encouraged. But we shall see. This is a free people. And, you know, Lincoln, the great Lyceum address in the Lyceum, Young Men's Lyceum. We live forever or die by suicide. Young Men's Lyceum. Thank you. President knew. What about the rest of it? That's why he's the president. All right. So there.
Okay, let's talk about education a little bit.
Okay.
I suspect this morning you had callers who were talking about Rick Perry's sad inability to recall that the Department of Energy was the third department he wanted to kill. But I believe first on his list, and first on the list of lots of conservatives, is the Department of Education, which you once ran. Should it be killed? If not, why should it stay alive, and what should it do?
First of all, I mentioned Perry up front, and I said I will not take calls on Perry.
Okay.
Because it was too embarrassing for words. Leave it alone. He's done. He's finished. And that's that. I wrote him a text this morning at 4:30, and I said, you've been a great governor. You're a very good man. I happen to know him. You're a good father and a good husband, and you've been a great governor, and will continue to serve your country and know that a lot of people love you. I don't know if he'll take that as an epitaph. And I didn't mean it as such. I just wanted to let him know someone was thinking about it. I said, I don't want any piling on. We did Herman Cain yesterday, and I said, I'm not going to do any more today. Again, it's a different kind of show. When
Bill Buckner, after 25 years, returned to Fenway Park, people cheered him despite the error. And, you know, Rick Perry, I think you're right.
I was thinking about Bill Buckner the other day. What was the context? Do you remember? We were talking about, he gets up earlier than I do, never mind. He's 46 years younger, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, he uses it as an excuse. You don't need a Department of Education. I don't know about energy and commerce. Those were the other two, I guess, in Perry's litany. But you don't need a Department of Education. Interestingly, when I was nominated, which took a long time, interesting story, the confirmation committee, you know, members of the cabinet have to be confirmed by the Senate, was Lowell Weicker, liberal Republican chairman of a committee, and he said, I will not appoint you until Ronald Reagan sends me a letter saying that he will not try to abolish the department, which he had talked about during the campaign. And I went to see the president, and I said, Mr. President, you do what you want. I mean, I don't have to have this job. I can do something else. I can go back to teaching philosophy. It's fine. I said, don't make me the deciding point. He said, no, I don't think I can get rid of this department anyway. And this was, after a big election, the second term, he had a huge majority. He said, I don't think I have the votes. And I don't think he did have the votes. Maybe you'd have the votes the next time. It wouldn't make a whole lot of difference to the country. George Will asked me this at the time, but he did it in the typical George Will way. Most people would say, do you need a Department of Education? As you said, because you're a regular human being. George Will said, must you exist? Because he shows off. But he's very smart. He's very good. No, I need not exist. The department doesn't need to exist. Education, if you want to do a post hoc propter hoc, which you need to be careful of, you know what that is, ergo propter hoc. Our scores are lower since the Department of Education was established than before. I don't think it's primarily because of the Department of Education, but it hasn't helped. It certainly hasn't helped. And here's, I think, the most telling story, which should convince everybody, big government people as well as small government people. When I was at the Department of Education, Marvin, we polled all the people who got our grants. And we said, how do you rate this program that we're funding? And then we did a tabulation. The most popular program that we ran at the U.S. Federal Department of Education was the block grant to the states. We take your money, take 10% out, and send it back to you. Now there's a sensible program. Why don't we not take it in the first place? Okay. But there are ways in which the Department of Education has messed things up by requiring ridiculous amounts of paperwork of schools and colleges and creating disincentives through complicated programmatic decisions. If a school district in Caddo, Louisiana, has many more students with learning disabilities and are way behind in math and reading, they'll get a lot more money. So I said to the superintendent, you got a struggling district here, huh? He said, no, we're doing great. We just lie about how many students we have so we can get more money. Well, not the highest ethical standards, but the incentives are all in the wrong place.
Okay, so we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
And at least as I recall, it came about because of essentially a deal between President Bush, who I still like, and Ted Kennedy, where Bush wanted testing, Kennedy wanted money, and so they agreed that they'd each have it. But of course, now that the tests are showing so many schools failing, it seems we're throwing out the tests. So were Republicans, was President Bush, were they snookered by Ted Kennedy and company?
Yeah, they were snookered. I had kind of mediocre support for it because it had one principle in it I liked, getting analogous to your area expertise. The federal welfare legislation at least said there is no federal entitlement, right? Mm-hmm. It broke that. It said you are not entitled to welfare simply because of your circumstances. Let states do different things. You could talk about that forever. Please comment if you want. Yeah. The No Child Left Behind said, if you are getting federal money, we want to know how your students are doing. I think that's perfectly reasonable. We give you money so children can succeed. We want to know if the children are succeeding. Problem is the standard of measurement, the test, the assessment was all wrong. They didn't have a national standard. We do have a pretty good test, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, but we ended up letting the states pretty much pick their own devices. As a result, you ended up with this Lake Wobegon business where every state has 85% of its students testing above the median, which is great work if you can get it. Doesn't hold mathematically, but everybody's good looking, everybody's smart, everybody's testing well, till we go to the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And then we find out that we haven't improved since 1963. We're 25th in the industrialized world, and so on. So you'd have to say it didn't work. Education gets better locally. The two most important things you need to know about education at the elementary and secondary level are the single most important adult in a child's life is a parent And the single most important thing about the education of the child vis-a-vis the parent is the parent's attitude toward education. Not how much he or she knows, but their attitude. Parent can be illiterate, not be able to do any of the homework with the kid, but says, this is important, you listen to the teacher, you turn off the TV, you do your work. That'll make a lot of difference. The second most important adult is the teacher. The research now is fascinating. Those of you who may be interested in this, there's a ton of literature. It's not class size, certainly not. It's not facilities. It's not technology. It is the quality of the adult in front of the classroom. The research is clear. You are much better off in a bad school with a good teacher than a supposedly really good school with bad teachers. It's kind of obvious in a way, but when you do the research, you see if you take kids at the 50th percentile in the third grade, and this has been researched extensively, third grade kids, 50th percentile in math, and you give them a teacher everyone regards as excellent, in 2 years they'll be at the 85th percentile. You give them a teacher everyone regards as not very good, in 2 years they'll be at the 35th percentile. What more do you need to know about teaching, evaluating teachers, rewarding excellence, and so on?
And much better to have an excellent teacher with a large class than mediocre teachers with small classes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Class size makes no difference. Parents like it. Kids tend to like it. Well, kids sometimes don't like it because they can't get away with as much. But class size is loved by the teachers' unions and loved by parents. But it makes no difference educationally.
Okay, so going back 10 years, there were, in many ways, two conservative positions on what to do to improve education. One was the national testing and so forth that found its way into No Child Left Behind, which we're agreed hasn't worked. And second possibility were decentralizing structural mechanisms like vouchers and tax credits and other types of things. The first didn't work. Is it time to take another shot at the second?
It is time to take another shot at the second with a caveat. I love my Assistant Secretary Checker Finn's phrase at the time he was working for me. National testing will never happen because conservatives will be opposed to any federal program with the word national in it, and the liberals will be opposed to anything with the word testing in it. So you'll never have the two, oxymoronic, internally contradictory. Yes, decentralize as much as possible, the old principle of subsidiarity. Put the money, if you will, or the voucher or the chit in the backpack of the student and let the student go wherever the parent wants the child to go. Private school, public school, religious school, homeschool. Full choice, full-scale choice, or what did we used to say, fever swamp choice, just all the way. However, instruments of evaluation that are serious, like NAEP, because we should know how we're doing. And I wouldn't expand NAEP much beyond what it is now. It doesn't test every child, but it tests a pretty big sample and tells us where we're going. By the way, Eric Hanashek at Stanford has estimated that if you could remove the bottom 10% in terms of quality of the teaching force in American elementary and secondary schools, America would go from 25th to 10th in the world. That's the drag that the bottom 10% puts on. You know, the people in their 30th and 40th percent aren't rocket scientists, aren't geniuses, maybe even aren't very bright, but they can get it done through the drills and homework and other things. It's really getting rid of the people who pretty much get everything wrong in the classroom and demotivate the kids, unmotivate the kids. So yeah, I'd go to decentralization.
Let's talk about our presidential
Let
sweeps.
me say one word about this, because we're in an institution of higher education. There are a lot of things wrong with American higher education, but choice isn't one of them. When you get a grant from the federal government, a guaranteed student loan or a Pell Grant, do you take it? Do you take any money? Good for you. Good for you. You can take it to any place that takes it. And that means you can go to Liberty Baptist. They do take it, don't they? Ooh. I can see an argument that's been had before. All right. You can take it to Liberty Baptist your first year, Holy Cross your second year, Maharishi University, and Hillel, Synagogue the fourth year. You'll be theologically confused, but you'll be entirely within the Constitution.
Right.
Because we say when it comes to federal student aid at the higher education level, we don't care where you take it. Now the strings come, and you get told to do all sorts of things. But you have that liberty, if you will, to go to those places. It's a restricted liberty later, wherever you want. But we don't have that at the elementary and secondary level, where obviously it's much more needed, because it's much more formative. It's much more important. As important as this is, kindergarten, first, second, third grade are more important.
Politics. There were times when people talked about your running for president, and you never did. Why?
First of all, disqualifications. Personal disqualification. I never had the passion for it. I never really wanted to. I was asked by Bob Dole if I would be his running mate. We were in California. We had written a speech for him about Hollywood and about the corrosive effects of the popular culture. And he asked me to ride in a car with him back to the hotel. And he said, "Who do you think I should have for vice president?" And I said, "Kemp." He said, "No, not that guy. That guy's crazy. He was the eventual choice." You know. I said, "Well, who are you thinking of?" He said, "How about you?" I said, "Me? Why me?" He said, "Academic, Eastern, Catholic, intellectual." I said, "I'm so moved. It's so personal. It's so marriage proposal, you know." Category. Fine, it's politics. And I thought about it. I just didn't have the heart for it. And then George W. Bush talked to me about it. And he said, how about you? And I said, "No, I can't do it." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I wrote the Book of Virtues." He said, "Well, that's a great thing." I said, "Not if you've lived as big and fully as I have. Fraternity life, gambling, hanging out. I didn't get married till I was 37. There's a country music song called "Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places." I was doing some of that. Nothing illegal, nothing felonious. But you could get away with it if you hadn't written the Book of Virtues. But when you've written the Book of Virtues, you set the standard up here. And so I would have never been able to meet that bar. Shortly after the publication of the Book of Virtues, I was at the Palm Restaurant in Washington, where I've been twice. You want to laugh? No. Okay. And I was drinking a martini and having a steak, and someone came in and said, "Is that virtuous?" And I said, "If it's perfectly mixed and perfectly cooked, it is." I am not trying to encourage either too much beef or drinking at all, especially underage people. It's against the law. Don't do it. But that's my life. And I don't need to go into any details. Again, nothing. I remember I was sitting next to Larry King once on an airplane. He said, "You should run for president." I said, "Why?" He said, "Have you ever left the scene of a hit-and-run accident?" I said, "No." He said, "Have you ever slept with a boy?" I said, "No." He said, "Run for president." So that seems to me a little low, don't you think? But that's why. And I never had the passion. I never had the passion for it. I'll tell you what you have to go through. Did you see what these guys are going through with these debates? And I'm on a campaign now. I started this morning with all my talk show hosts. I'm going to the Republican National Committee. We are not going to subject these candidates to 25 debates with these self-important, self-imposed, morally superior people trying to nail them. Who do these media people think that they are, for God's sakes? I thought Romney handled that beautifully. They asked Kane, what kind of a CEO do you think you are? And they asked Romney, would you hire him? Audience booed, and the audience should have booed. I'm, usually not for audience booing. But what people have to go through. I remember sitting, and this is really the most important reason, because, you can always make a public confession about your sins and say, "I'll never eat steak again." But I was sitting with Phil Gramm, and he was asking me to support him in that same race with Dole. And I said, "How you feeling about this race?" And he said, "I have 150 receptions in the next 30 days, and I can't wait to get to them." And I thought, my God, I would rather have my face sewn to the floor than go to 150 receptions in 30 days. My wife will tell you, I get there to a party and I say, let's go. And you just have to, you have to sit there, and some guy who's a big donor to the party comes up to you and says, You know, most people think 2 + 2 = 4. I think it equals 5. What do you think? You got to say, well, it's an interesting proposition. You can't say you're an idiot. You know, so I'm not made for this. But I love what I do. And in the presence of students, let me just say, if people say, why'd you get a PhD in philosophy? I said, because I wanted to be a talk show host. I wanted to be a radio. I didn't know Shakespeare. Readiness is all. Readiness, readiness, readiness. Do what you know and what you love. And I pursued what I knew and what I was trying to know and loved, literature and philosophy. And I do this stuff on the radio, and I say, well, power. They say, well, what do you mean by power? I said, Aristotle. Power is the ability to be and make things be. People say, where do you get that? Where do you get that? Patrick Henry College is where you get it, if you're doing your homework. So I love doing what I'm doing. And I have 5 jobs. I write books. And I just, I.F. Stone said once, I'm having so much fun I ought to be arrested. Maybe one of these days I will be. I just love what I do. I love, thank goodness, thank God it's Friday, and I love Monday. I can't wait to get up at 3:30 in the morning. It's a little weird, I agree. And go and wake him up or be awakened by his prompt summary of the news, and then go into the studio and get it on with the audience. It's great. Sorry I'm being long-winded.
No, the stories are great. This is what journalistically you always want to do, just sit
Get
and
him
listen
talking.
to stories.
Let him get himself in trouble. You're a good one, too. It's always the nice guys who get you in the most trouble.
So, okay, the donor comes up and you have to kind of kiss up to him.
Yep.
How about radio audiences? I asked this in this context. I was once having a conversation with a person who's a host of, I guess, one of the top 20 talk shows and radio talk shows, and he was saying 19 of the 20 talk show hosts have to be against immigration and attacking illegal immigrants and so forth. He was saying he was the exception to that. But I'm just wondering, I mean, when do you tell callers you're an idiot?
No. No, I don't tell callers because they're my guests.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I view it. Yeah. And there's enough of that on radio. I do a Mark Levin imitation, and I love Mark Levin, but that's standard. It's standard. We don't do it because I said the first day of the show, we are going to raise the standards. We're going to have a conversation. And I said, I studied philosophy. Our standards are the Socratic conditions of dialogue. Candor, intelligence, and goodwill. As much intelligence as we can muster at 6 in the morning. This morning we didn't get the date of the date right, did we?
I don't know whose fault that was.
Yeah, I wonder. Well, Patrick Henry, dates don't matter. It's creative thinking. No, I'm kidding. I know, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, President. I know dates matter. But candor, intelligence, and goodwill, and so they're all guests. Now, there are people we've had to dismiss, but they soon learn and they stop calling. But we have pretty heated discussions. I got a few people going this morning. I said, listening to the panel last night, I'm thinking Mormon. And boy, that got my audience going. Oh man, that's a cult and you can't do that. I just said, look, I don't want to talk about religion here. Romney is smart and smooth and was very good last night. And Huntsman is a little snarky, but he's very smart and he's very experienced. So, I mean, I will do that occasionally, but that's about as far as we'll go. We treat our callers with great respect. They treat us with respect, but we argue like crazy. And we say the most important voice is yours to the audience, and we mean it, and we actually listen to them. Jeremy Bentham says, the way to put people at ease is to make them feel comfortable. The best way to make them feel comfortable is to appear as if you like them. The best way to appear as if you like them is actually to like them. And we actually listen to what our callers have to say. And if it's a point that's off point, we move on, and we don't dwell and we don't yell. What do we talk about most often? I guess politics, but it's not number crunching. It's kind of ideas and theories, and we have great guests on. A very typical guest for us would be Heather McDonald. You know Heather's work. And she said, how come when the New York Times writes about poverty, it never mentions family structure? husband, wife, what's the word I'm looking for? Nuclear family households are in poverty. 34% of single parent families are in poverty. It makes a difference. I was raised by a single mom, by the way, but it makes a difference. New York Times just won't acknowledge it. So we try to go just a level a little deeper than the headlines and talk about, you know, why that's the case and why people won't talk about it. And those are the kinds of things. What would you say off the top of your head, the things that most interest the audience?
Probably culture and education.
Right. If we talk about education, a little bit I was doing about schools and teachers and parents, the show could go for 3 days. The phone lines won't stop ringing.
Hi, you talked a lot about the importance of finding good teachers. How do you find good teachers, and how do you train them?
I think it's born. I think it's a talent. I think some people can do it, some people can't. I think you can get better at it. You certainly can get worse at it. But you know, I know them when I see them. But the interesting thing is, an awful lot of people want to be teachers, and I think what you do is you hire your new teachers, and then you evaluate them, and you assess them, and you seek everyone's opinion, every group's opinion. Students, other teachers, administrators, parents. And you will find, most of the time, consensus. This notion that we can't evaluate teachers is crazy. Teacher union literature will say it's too wooden and it's based only on test scores. Well, test scores should matter some, but not everywhere. Try this empirical test. I've been to 602 schools now. When I became Secretary of Education, my wife, who's a special ed elementary school teacher, said, don't just make pronouncements, go find out what you're talking about first. Go visit schools. And I said, why should I be different from other people in the cabinet? And she said, because you're the Secretary of Education, do your homework. So I went to schools, and I've been going to schools ever since. I love visiting schools. I'll tell you, too, I'll bet you about 85% accuracy. I can walk into a school, and in 2 minutes, I can tell you whether it's a good school or not. Tell by the ethos of the place, how it feels, how it smells, how it looks, how people interact, you can tell. And if you go to the teacher room, this is kind of an interesting empirical test. You say to the teachers, who are the great teachers in this school? I have never had anybody answer that by saying, we don't have any idea. Everyone is wonderful. You know, like Wobegon, everything is great. People say, oh, well, Mary is the best literature teacher you'll ever find. Jack teaches math, draws a circle like that, it's a perfect circle. Everybody knows who the leaders are because they're the people they go to for help, advice. How do you do this? People look up to. Follow the trail. So you follow the trail. The really interesting thing is this propaganda about teacher shortage and quality. 18% of Harvard graduates last year applied for Teach for America. I'm not saying Harvard's the greatest place in the world. I've been there, and I went on its 350th anniversary, and I rained on their parade. It was a fabulous day. I can tell you about it. It was really fun. One of the most fun things I ever did. And
you got to tell us about it.
I'm a bona fide graduate. Anyway, so I could do it. Anyway, 18%, 20% Princeton applied for Teach for America. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I don't know if you have applicants here. Good for you. But all sorts of talented, smart young people want to be teachers. Now, there are barriers to entry, but we could get them in, and it would be great, and then you evaluate them and see. Harvard? Real quickly. It was their 350th anniversary. I was the Secretary of Education. So they invited me up to, pay tribute to Harvard. And everybody was just up there just licking and bowing and scraping. Oh, my God, it's Harvard, it's Harvard. And I got up and I said, I lived here for 3 years. I was in law school and I taught freshmen and sophomores. And I said, this place isn't as good as you think it is. And I said, of course, nobody could be as good as you guys think you are. And James J. Kilpatrick, the journalist, was just right. He said, man, this is great. And it was everywhere. You could look it up. It was great. And I just went on. I said, this stupid thing you call a core curriculum. I said, this isn't a core curriculum. There are no courses here. There's no body of, you know what I'm talking about. You did this at King's, right? There's no body of knowledge here. This is phony. This is fraudulent. This is about this phony notion that students at 17 or 18 are all perfectly fine and mature, and they can pick their own course of study so the faculty can go off and do graduate research. This is just phony. I said, happily I had in hand the commencement address of the student, not the commencement address, the baccalaureate address of the kid from the year before, and he said, I'm an economics major at Harvard. It was really great to go to Harvard and to be in the same city and state as John Kenneth Galbraith. I never saw him, but I apparently am in the same city and state with him. I'm assuming students here see the faculty. Yes, and they have, they talk to them and they can reach them and be instructed by them. Anyway, I went on and on. The president of the university, this is his birthday party. My wife said, you were invited to a party. You don't, pour kitty litter in the punch bowl, I said, honey, this, as Chuck Berry says, this is my chance. I'm going to take it. And the president of the university, Derek Bach, said, may I approach the podium? Like you may before this is over. I said, sure, come on up. And he said, that's just bombastic, preposterous bombast. He said, the core curriculum is blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, baloney. I said, it's not. I said, what writer do you have to read before you graduate from Harvard? What philosopher do you have to study? What, theory or body of knowledge? Couldn't name a single one. It's all methods of blah, 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 Anyway, it's a dodge, total dodge. He said, well, it is a core. I said, it isn't. He finally was just stamping his foot. He was so mad. And he said, it is too, And I said, call it a core light, okay? And when the speech was over, the students who had a good sense of humor gave me a case of Coors Light, a 6-pack. Sorry to bring that up again. Anyway, it was great. You can read the write-ups. They were fun. My wife said I had bad manners, so yeah.
I haven't seen your latest book. I look forward to seeing it. But what would you say in a nutshell? How would you define manhood? What does it mean to be a man?
In a nutshell, I'll be brief. Two things. There are two Latin words for man, as far as I know, if I remember my Latin. Genitor, which is the biological act of manhood, fathering. So makes you a father, that you're a genitor. We don't need a whole lot of instruction about that. The culture's got that one down pretty clear. Lots of encouragement to be genitor out there. Genitor, not janitor. The second word is pater. In Latin Catholic Mass, we used to have the Catholic Mass, we still have it in some places. We say, Pater noster qui es in caelis, our Father who art in heaven. And that Father is the one who takes care. He's the one who takes responsibility. He is the one who protects and defends and measures up. He's the one who's accountable. You could put it in terms of the founders, because my book starts with the introduction with a bunch of data, a bunch of facts about man. And you could say that three of the things the founders identified as founding virtues are missing in a lot of men today. Commitment to work, commitment to marriage, and faith. Now, those numbers they're just down. The numbers are just down. 1970, 80% of 25 to 29-year-olds were married. Now it's 40%. I mean, that's a big drop. A lot of unemployment, not just because of the market and the economy, but a lot of people living at home in the basement at 25, 30 years old, not trying that hard. And faith, we know the numbers, men on their knees, acknowledging their reliance and dependence on the Creator. I gathered data from all sorts of sources, mostly the Census Bureau, so I don't think it's arguable. The interesting thing, since the book's come out, the strongest reaction, positive reaction I've had is from women. Women in their 20s and 30s saying, you don't know the half of it. Woman called and said, my 3 daughters, I have 2 married and 1 getting married. Each one of them said, I'm lowering my standards, but I want to get married. What a sad, horrible thing to say, lowering my standards, but I want to get married. So men have to man up, so to speak, and this book is about what it means to be a man in a variety of contexts, 6 contexts that I talk about. I start with men at war, then men at work, men at play, a lot of sports stuff in this book, and then men in the polis, in the political marketplace, the polity, men with women and children, and Men in Prayer and Reflection. And tell, I think, encouraging stories, cite speeches, remarks, poems. The most interesting aspect of the book to me, we didn't have this in the Book of Virtues, is profiles. And we profile a lot of people, living people, and some of them are famous, like Alvaro Uribe, brave president of Colombia who fought the drug cartels, and Aaron Rodgers, who's an interesting guy. And other people are regular, ordinary, everyday people. People call my radio show. I have a guy named Coach Ken who coaches football in Denton, Texas. He calls once, twice a week. We profiled him. The book opens with Donovan Campbell, who was a captain in the Marine Corps in Ramadi. And his guys were, first story in the book, his guys were on patrol and a bunch of kids came out looking for candy. And they got out and they gave them candy. It was a trap. The Al-Qaeda had set up the kids to go out because they know American soldiers are suckers for kids. Tough Marines, you know. And then they opened fire. They mostly hit kids, not Marines. And of course, Marines are better protected than kids. Military procedure called for him to get his men the hell out of there. Excuse me. He said, Marines, do what you know. And they immediately went, got on their knees, and were bandaging these kids and stuff. All this stuff was flying. And it was the subject of an inquiry. They didn't do anything because his men just so vociferously defended him. But he lost one of his best men, you know, in that ambush. And, you know, some decisions aren't easy, but, you know, he took responsibility for his decision. He also took responsibility for those kids. And he lives in Dallas now, and, you know, he works for Pepsi-Cola. And he's a great guy, and we talked to his dad today, as a matter of fact. But that's the story that opens the book, because men at war are at their best and at their worst.
First of all, thank you for your conversation with America on all the number of topics that you have brought up. One of my titles here is Dean for Men, and so I'm very interested in your book.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has come up in discussion is that education, to some extent, has become anti-male, or at least that's a hypothesis that's been posed in some of our discussion. Do you have any observations and solutions regarding that?
It's a great question. It's a very complicated question. The argument here is that not only, you know, do we not need men to go out and hunt, you know, animals anymore, except in Ohio. All right. Anyway, yeah, pass a law. Anyway, and that, you know, the workplace has become, you know, less in need of superior male strength and so on. But and there are a lot of arguments about this in the workplace, but also the classroom has become more congenial to female sensibility. Working in teams. Do women work better in teams? I'm not writing the book of women. I don't understand. Just a question. Anyway, men I know. Women I married 31 years. I still do the wrong thing most of the time. I wake up and I say, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. That's how I start the day. It works for a while, a few hours. Anyway, yes, I think it has in this sense that there's, short answer, they got rid of recess in a lot of schools. Big mistake. When our boys were acting up, they were made to sit in the corner. Our boys, 7, 8, 9 years old, they were jocks. They were, you know, they were full of fidget. And we went and pleaded with the school, can you make them run around the track? You know, just work them out. They said, this is punishment. Well, it really is punishment, but I wonder if this is the right kind of punishment. It is arguable that this has happened. We said, you go girl, and the girls went, and we said we're going to be more attentive to the female sensibility, and we have been, and now the girls are really, using the same analogy, outpacing the boys. It's extraordinary. I know a couple of the deans of admissions at, again, Ivy League schools, for what it's worth, for what they're worth, and they're not worth as much as their reputation. They said if we did it just on the scores, we'd be 85% female. We have to do affirmative action. They won't say that publicly. We have to do affirmative action for the boys, because the boys are falling so far behind. I think there's probably something to it, but I haven't studied it in detail. It's a fair question. Got a track here?
No, back
Well, you got grounds, you got land, you can run. Not yet. Okay. Good. I'm for that.
Let me ask about, and we're going to have to conclude very shortly, but
Yeah, can I tell you where I'm going? Well, I got to conclude. I got to go to Dulles.
okay.
I am going to Los Angeles. The Claremont Institute, which is a great think tank, is having its annual Churchill dinner.
Okay.
And the Churchill Award is going to my former intern. He used to carry my coffee and my books, which shouldn't make you feel like you might be something someday. Beach.
I'll get your coffee afterwards.
Yes. Paul Ryan,
Okay.
who is the chairman of the Budget Committee, and he's getting the Churchill Award. And I am so daggone proud of him. And he is, I'm delighted I'll be introducing him. I introduced him the other night at the Kemp dinner, and I said, here he is, great son of Wisconsin, perfectly fit physical specimen, worked under a mentor for several years, has now emerged in his own, recognized everywhere in Wisconsin. He started to get out of his chair. I said, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers. Sit down, Paul, sit down. Go ahead, sorry.
Let me just ask about a president who was very fiscally responsible, but I learned something about him just looking at this Calvin Coolidge and the joy that went out of his presidency when, tell us the story.
Is that the saddest thing you've ever read?
Yeah.
It's the, read it. You get such a good voice. Read it. I cannot read this without being moved. I've read it 1,000 times. Calvin Coolidge was known as Silent Cal. Man of very few words. Wouldn't you like that right now in a president? Two girls, young women, went to the White House to meet him, and one made a bet with the other. I'll bet I can get him to say more than 2 words. And they met him, and they said, Mr. President, she said, I made a bet with my friend I could get you to say more than 2 words. And he said, you lose.
Well, here he actually spoke more than 2 words. This is when his 16-year-old son died. My own participation, this is during a political campaign. My own participation in the campaign was delayed by the death of my son Calvin, which occurred on the 7th of July. He was a boy of much promise, proficient in his studies with a scholarly mind, who had just turned 16. He had a remarkable insight into things. The day I became president, he had just started to work in a tobacco field. When one of his fellow laborers said to him, if my father was president, I would not work in a tobacco field, Calvin replied, if my father were your father, you would. He goes on, after a few other things. We do not know what might have happened to him under other circumstances, but if I had not been president, he would not have raised a blister on his toe, which resulted in blood poisoning, playing lawn tennis in the South grounds. In his suffering, he was asking me to make him well. I could not. When he went, the power and the glory of the presidency went with him. The ways of providence are often beyond our understanding. It seemed to me that the world had need of the work that it was probable he could do. I do not know why such a price was exacted for occupying the White House.
Just crying out to him to help, and he couldn't help. You ever heard anything so sad? It's just remarkable writing, and reminds us of what's most important.
It points us to Christ also.
Yes, it does. It points us to Christ. Thoughts that lie too deep for tears, Wordsworth says. You know, I live in the Beltway, politics. You can read King Lear and remember there are things that are true and more important than politics that lie beyond politics. Yeah. And you just said it.
Yeah. Question over here.
Which schools do you think are better, public schools
Where
or
are you?
home schools?
How are you? Are you on the faculty?
No, I'm not. So which schools do you think are better, public schools or home schools?
Oh, public schools or home schools? In the aggregate, you know what that means? Yeah, well, you will when you get your faculty appointment. No, it's a great question. In the aggregate, that is overall, if you add them all up and divide and average them, the home schools are better. Home schools get better results than public schools. Homeschool students score on average better than the products of the public schools, which is a very interesting thing. is there another profession where the amateurs do better than the people who've been trained? You know, if homeopathic medicine, you know, were this way, right? So it's a very interesting question. However, there are some very good public schools. There are some excellent public schools. Thomas Jefferson School of Math and Science, not far from here, in Alexandria, Virginia, is just a terrific institution for studying math and science. And there are other good public schools. But why not give parents the choice? Why not let parents decide? If they think there's a good public school in the area and they want to do that, fine, good private school, good Catholic school. Or if they want to homeschool, then give them that tax credit or rebate. Great question, thank you. The most succinct of our questions, I think, maybe? No, I'm kidding. Kidding, no, all the questions have been great. Can I say something before we end?
Please.
I've been giving him a bad time. College is measured by its graduates, and you've done very well with this young man. I don't mean to embarrass him. I often mean to embarrass him, as I did earlier. And I will continue to, but he's an extraordinary young man, and part of it is him, is he and his parents, what they did, but part of it is what you all did, and it speaks volumes. It speaks well. He's a man of balance and good sense, remarkable good sense and common sense beyond his years, indefatigable given the hours, and testifies to this college. I'm very grateful to him, and he's every bit the equal of every other producer of a national talk show. And I believe in the youth movement very much in the old-fashioned sense. Remember when you read the Founding Fathers, the pictures of those guys, they look like me and Olasky, but they weren't. Well, they were as old as Olasky. No. They were young men. These were young men of the Revolution. They were at their 20s, 30s. Hamilton writing Federalist Papers in his 20s. Madison, 32, 33, writing the Constitution. Remarkable. And so be ready. Readiness is all. And in terms of your jobs and your work, do what you know and what you love. The first job may not be anything you either care about or love, but keep pushing. I recommended a young man today for the Publius Fellowship, and he asked me to write a letter. And I said, draft it yourself. I always want to see how a person drafts their own letter of recommendation. So I once had a kid who said, "This is the most extraordinary young man I've ever met." I said, "You're not going anywhere." Anyway, so they always undershoot. You know, they always undersell. But this guy is an unemployed classics major. I said, "For God's sakes, what are you applying for, man?" He said, "Publius Fellowship." I said, "Tell him who Publius is. You're the only guy applying who probably knows who Publius is." So he said, "Let me go back and rework this." Anyway, you know, you can bounce around a lot, but take your passions, your intellectual passions with you, and it's the critical thing.
That's a good note in which to conclude. Thank you for all the kind things you've said about Patrick Henry, and please join me in thanking Bill Bennett.